So I guess we could start by saying our names again, since that's what it says that we are supposed to do. So mine's Michaela Wilson.
Mine's Susan Mars.
Katie Cook.
Ashley Angus.
And I think Colette's on the phone, but Colette Abraham's here.
Okay, good. So I guess we'll just start out with the first part of that first question. What were your impressions of the CRC article and video by the United Nations?
It was very clever and sounded so logical and positive, and I was very disturbed by it. I think Susan agrees.
I told my boss about after watching those two and what they were advocating, and I was like, I was so embarrassed by the time that second guy was done. I was rooting for him. I was like, oh my, this is awful.
Yeah, it was kind of scary to see um, how much good there really was in it, and yet how much scary things were woven in there with the rest of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But so, what about the article or the videos by the parental rights?
I was like super disturbed about that one. Like I was like freaking out a little bit because like when it started talking about how parents are like only allowed to give their children advice, not like actually teach their children, I was just like shocked because like I was like, what's the point of being a parent then? Like I just didn't understand like how they could even think about passing a law like that. It was just like I don't know. It was just crazy to think because I couldn't handle that if that actually did pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like it took a lot of, um, I don't know, power, I guess you could call it, power away from the parents and gave it to the children who, I mean, they're still developing. They don't really know what's best quite yet. And yet they're taking that away from the parents who know a little bit more and giving it to the children who know quite a bit less.
Yeah, and we see that going on right now where they're trying to make the school system the parent, and the excuses that they use for schools taking over particular parts of parenting. And I like the opportunity I have to be on school board because I offered to give parenting classes so that the parents continue to have their rights. But to listen to the people on the panel is just crazy to listen to what they're saying, that parents shouldn't even be involved anymore. And they always use the excuse of the parents that are abusive, because we can all understand that, right? But it encompasses all of us. And I noticed they said that in the video where, what about the parents that are doing a good job, which really is a majority of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now this affects everybody.
Yeah, I think they kind of put it in a way of saying they are, how did they put it in the video? Maybe I wrote it down. No, it's not in my notes. But they said something about they're expecting parents to, rather than have the child's best interest in their mind, have their own interests rather than the child's, I don't know, kind of that in a sum. Did anyone else have any comments they wanted to add? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So, has anyone in our group ever lived in or spent some time in another country where CRC has been ratified? I know I haven't.
No, I haven't either.
No.
So, did anybody do any research on how those countries are changing and how it's um, affecting the children?
I only saw it from the UN's point of view. I haven't really gotten the parents or the citizens' point of view. But of course, from the standpoint of the country or the UN, they're saying that healthcare is better, kids are getting education when they would most likely not, all this other stuff. But I would really like to hear what parents are saying, what the citizens are saying, and what the communities are saying. And so. And it just makes me think about how when you read all of this stuff, from the standpoint, you're like, I can see why you want to help. I can see that you don't want to leave kids behind in whatever circumstance, or you want to give them the best care that you possibly can, but you cannot dictate the lives of others as much as you want, as much as they want. Because when you read it, it's really good stuff on the surface, but it's so hard because the phrase where it says they take it from the purest forms of white to all of the shades of gray, and you just have to stop and say, okay, what line has been blurred in this instance, and what line has been blurred in this situation, and and I really liked what Quintel Cook said about how he has hope in the future, because he says people everywhere want to do good, want to be good. We just need to have a voice. And so I really hope that those countries that have adopted this convention are already standing up. And I would love if anybody has any of those resources to share, because that's the only way we can kind of change these things, or influence them to change, is if we listen or research what these parents or citizens have to say. Sorry, that was a long rant.
No, you asked the right question, because I pulled out all my homework here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is it backwards for you guys?
No, it's right.
Okay, it says Protecting Children's Sexual Rights Revolution, and honestly, this is what it's all about. And these are the talking points and all the CRC's documentation. And these are the things that are written in it. It's kind of terrifying. Let's see, strictly respect the right to privacy and confidentiality of adolescents. Let's see, I should have underlined some of them. All of it has to do with sex, and that's the problem. Their right to reproductive information, their right to experiment with their bodies, possibility of medical treatment without parental consent, no consent from parents or guardians about sexual information. This whole book has been researched of people who have read CRC's documents, and it's crazy. It's all about giving children right to their satisfaction and pleasures in the sexual ways from the day they're born, and they put it under health. They put it under the title of health, and so I can email you guys this book that's from Stand for the Family, if anybody's ever heard about that. Actually, it's Family Watch International. And there's also this cool book that they have called the Resource Guide, and if anybody's interested in that, also shares not only what CRC's up to, but it's also talking points that we can fight it with. So it's pretty cool stuff. That's what I was excited to bring to the conversation.
Well, I'm glad you know about it.
Yeah, thank you. When I was when I was reading it, kind of the idea, especially when you were talking, Katie, it made me think that they're almost taking away, they want everyone to learn from their own experiences and make their own choices, but at the same time, like, I feel like you develop so much better when you can learn from other people's experiences. Like, I learned so much from my parents when they shared with me and almost enforced certain things on me because they've had the experience. So then I don't have to make the mistake to learn from it. But I feel like this new way of doing things is almost encouraging children to make their own mistakes in a way, and then they have to learn from their mistakes, and their parents have no say in protecting them from these kinds of mistakes.
Right. You used a really important word there, by the way, protecting. They say they're protecting, but
Yeah, people have a very different idea of what protecting really is, I guess.
yeah.
So how did Kelly's presentation help your understanding of the ecological approach to family advocacy?
Real quick, I'm just going to jump in from on the last one. I looked briefly. I just typed in, I can't remember what I searched, negative and positive effects of CRC on nations or something, and something from Africa. Came up, just a generalization. Some of the positives that they talked about is they drafted new child laws and reform in the children's rights field. So they kind of talked about that. There was kind of some lengthy, explanations about that. And they talked about their progress and had said that there was some progress, but progress they called it uneven. But just couple of the negative that they talked about was, one, the cost to implement what they were asked to implement through the CRC, and anxiety about effective central authority was the wording. So anxiety about having, someone else kind of dictating and telling them what to do. So just throwing that in there. I've been trying to write, so I didn't jump in quick enough.
No, thank you. That really added. When you're talking about the authority, it does kind of take, when they were talking in the Protecting Parental Rights video, they mentioned how the treaty or the CRC would trump even our own constitution within the United States. That would go over everything. And yet, they also mentioned that all of the good in the CRC, we already had laws, and we already had laws to protect those, to do that good. It was the bad that's woven in there that would change us. All of the good is already here. So I thought that was very interesting, and your comment, Colette, made me think of that.
That's crazy.
So, did anyone else have anything on that one before we move to the next one? No? Okay. So, on Kelly's presentation, how did it help you understand the ecological approach to family advocacy?
I like how she said that we each work in different systems and that each system relies on each other, like we're all working for the same purpose, and it doesn't take away from, how should I say that? She basically said that even though you may work in a different system than I do, we're each working towards the same goal, and that is protecting marriage and family and being an advocate for marriage and family. And it's so important because each one affects the other. And when she started, she talked about how she kind of got into the UN, and her friend just basically was like, hey, did you hear about what's going on in the UN? And she's like, no. And I didn't even know that the UN was involved as it is. And so I think, even if we're working at like the micro level, if we are aware of what's happening in the macro level, we can be better prepared to help educate those immediate families, our immediate families around us. Like, it's just amazing that each system influences and directly affects the other, whether it's micro on up or macro on down. And so she's like, it's okay, whatever system you work in, you're each working towards a better goal.
I just wanted to add to that. I had an opportunity to go to something called the World Congress of Families, if anyone's heard of that. And it's an international group. And I think it was like 10 or 15 years, I can't remember, since it's been held in America, and it happened to be in Salt Lake City. But this is what it was all about, is all these conversations that we're learning in this class. But we had people getting up there representing a lot of things that they're trying to protect and fight for. But the whole theme was families. And I just wanted to, speaking of the ecology of it all and how we work within, we all affect each other in our decisions. They kept saying, okay, we're up here and we're going to the United Nations, or we're up here and we're working in the government, or we're up here and we're in the school system. But the theme of the message was, we are wasting our time if you are not strengthening yourself as an individual and strengthening your own families, because we're just going to keep the circle going. And so that really opened my mind to me as an individual, how I actually, in just my individual decisions, can affect not just my family, but all of society, as I either weaken or strengthen, or not get involved, or do get involved, that one person has so much power. It's just a thought that came.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katie. That it is crazy how much power one person has. I mean, the whole world is made up of single individuals, and although we may think like, oh, we're just one, like, we are what make it up. I was talking to my husband about this the other day, how I was like, oh, there's so much bad going on, like, with families, and like, I just don't know what I want to do so much. I want to just change everything, but I'm just one person, so how can I change that? And he's a science nerd, and so of course he has to bring science into it, but it made things really clear to me. He's like, everything in this world is made up of little atoms, and you can change, like, one little molecule can change, and it can change the entire makeup of an object just with that one molecule changing something or moving somewhere else. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true, that even though we're just one little molecule in this huge world, our changes can almost have a domino effect and help others change and cause others to change. And like, I don't know, how he explained it was way more scientific and over my head, so this is me trying to explain something I didn't really understand, but I just thought it was a really cool analogy on how something so small can make such a huge difference.
I don't think that's any different than one day everything's happy in your family, and then one person like loses their temper, or one person gets, shows some negative activity, and it affects the whole family within seconds. Right?
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. And then ripples. Oh, I wanted to point out that that's actually a really good point, because we heard Kelly's, is it Kelly? Her experience, but this book that I showed you, the lady that first started this organization, she was just curious and was going to the UN meetings, and she was just listening, and she was shocked at what she was seeing on how one of the countries that I cannot remember at this time was defending families, and almost the whole group was against her, all these different countries, and she was just shocked that nobody wanted to protect families. It didn't make sense to her. And this lone person who was trying to speak up for families was losing the battle, and the lady that was volunteering at the United Nations or just visiting, she just had a thought, and she just happened to read something in a document. She wasn't even researching it or analyzing it. She just remembered a sentence she read that had to do with something about the families that's written in a treaty. And so she just calmly opened up the book and she quietly handed it in front of the lady that was trying to defend families, and it overturned what was happening, and families won that day just because of her one act of remembering, listening to the spirit, and putting that document in front of the one defending families. So there's your little Adam, your little orphan.
Wow, that is crazy. Kind of like, no, go ahead, Colette.
I just keep thinking of how important it is for us to take the initiative and be informed. Because without information and some sort of a base and some sort of I don't know, research, quality research or whatever, just some sort of intelligence to back whatever we have to say or we have to share, and going forward with it. Not obviously keeping the knowledge to ourselves isn't enough, but having the knowledge to share and the ability to speak in intellectual ways. So it sounds like we know what we're talking about, and we need to know what we're talking about.
And you bring out an important part. I mean, we just watched this video on CRC, and they glazed over it the way they needed to convince us of something. But some sweet lady said, "Oh, I'm going to read this document." And she wrote a whole entire book and found out it was mostly about addiction to money and trying to sell the sex idea. And it's just crazy.
That is, it's almost sad how everything is going. But did anybody else have a comment they wanted to make on the presentation? No?
I think you've covered it pretty well.
I think so too. So the next question is, what system or level do you personally feel would be the most difficult to advocate in, and why?
I said the where did it go? Sorry, the macro, like the big groups, just because I think personally that I would get really nervous and I just wouldn't feel like I knew a lot more than like a lot of people. Because like if I just talk amongst my family, people I'm comfortable with, of course I could say whatever is on my mind and all that stuff. But if I'm in a big group, I try to give them as much knowledge as I'm capable of, but also having them understand what I mean, and then not like what's the word? I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Just like, oh my gosh, I totally just forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind. Hold on. Maybe I'll think of it in just a second.
Back.
Yeah.
See, I'm the opposite. Like, I think at a microsystem level, I would do very well, and that's for me, and that's because I think I posted it in this class where I thought I wanted to be a therapist or a counselor, like a family counselor, and then I quickly realized that that was not for me because I get very emotionally involved, and I don't have the emotional stamina because if someone's coming to me and they're looking for relief, I am oh, come here, let me hug you, let me fix things, let me bootsy you, and then I end up getting way too overwhelmed. And the other day when I was thinking of where do I want to go with this marriage and family studies career, like I have no idea where I want to go, and it came to me, I'm like, I would not mind being a motivational speaker. I think that would be really fun because then not only am I going out to communities and to parents and to families and to youth, I'm teaching something that I
truly believe in and want to be an advocate for, but I'm not completely like, in deep with what families are experiencing. I'm close enough, but not in the thick of things, if that makes sense. So I thought micro levelly, I knew I couldn't do it.
Oh, and then what I was gonna say is I totally just remembered. It was I'm afraid to offend people and like how I view things because like I just think of it as what is like the main thing that we're going on now and what like my topic is in the class is like gay marriage. If I say what is really on my mind or what the church teaches, I know a ton of people it would offend. But I'm really trying just to stand up for the family and my children and the church. Like that's my biggest fear of speaking to people, and that's the micro group that I was scared of. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be so afraid in the macro level because of what you said. Like, you almost can't say anything without offending at least someone.
right?
Yeah, like, I've been one of those people that I'm like, oh, I don't want to offend anyone. I want to only say things if they're gonna be like nice and nobody's gonna freak out about them. But and at the same time, I think about like in history, how many people have advocated for things like Martin Luther and all of these things where like it's almost unsafe for them. Like I totally admire their courage and what they've done, but at the same time, it's like it kind of scares me to advocate at that level because of the offense, and you offend the wrong person and it could be almost dangerous to your life. Like I think for me personally that would be why it would be hardest for me to advocate at that level, is that fear.
What I notice is um, I used to be there, and then I had kids, and then they went to high school, and I found out all the things the teachers were doing with inviting their special guests to teach about embracing their gender curiosity. And I used to be someone who kind of sat at the back of the room, and now I seem to just get involved with everything, and I don't even care if I offend people because I feel like they offend my children. And so it's interesting when you become a mother and you get to become a mother bear, what abilities you don't realize you have that come out. So
I agree with you because like I've even noticed like my kids are very very young, but like I've had problems with just people like even in my family that I would have never thought I would have to say something to them because I'm protecting not only me but I'm protecting my children and my husband, and I say things that in my mind I would just never say to anybody, but when it comes to protecting them, I am like the mother bear, like you said. Like it is a real thing. It's kind of scary, but I think that, like you said, when they get into high school, I think you will just totally change because I've noticed that about myself that I've changed to who I could talk to.
yeah. And maybe that's the conversation is, we might be an advocate at a micro level at this part of our life, and then later we might find ourselves in all the other higher, broader, outreaching ones. So it's kind of interesting. And Kelly said that in her thing is the experiment people, not her experience. Sorry, I rhymed. What our experiences bring us to do in all the advocacy that we do, where it leads us.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's just getting a little bit of confidence too, and because I'm naturally I'm a sit back, I'm a listener. It's not necessarily who I am to be outspoken, but I keep thinking about the quote that we've heard before and that she shared when Kelly shared. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. So I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking over this conversation, but with my experience lately, what I liked about this conference that we went to, that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just thought I was going to a conference, not realizing there was like 60 delegates from 60 different countries, or hundreds of delegates from 60 different countries, and it was just crazy. But the whole week, they all gave different perspectives of how they advocate. And then at the end of the week, they said, now where do you stand? Where can you fill this in? And some of the things they mentioned is some of you like to educate, so you can write papers just to educate if you have time for that. Some of you have a lot of networks because you've been involved with particular people, so you are a networker. You know, how can you utilize that? Some of you are already into politics, and if you have time, go ahead and run for school board or Congress. Those of you that have a lot of time, you can get into the international part of it. Some of you are still raising your children, so you can just stand guard and pay attention to what's going on. Another thing is some of us are gatherers, so we are good at gathering camaraderie and then let somebody else take over with the camaraderie. And some of us love social media, so you just post on social media and you educate people there. So there were just all these different levels that you could join depending on where you were in life, and I absolutely loved it. So
Really neat.
So kind of finding your strengths,
right.
recognizing your strengths, and then using them to advocate.
Yeah. That's what I love about this class is I like to gather and all that, but I've always wanted to be a speaker, and I'm terrible at speaking and writing, and that's why I like this class so much, because I'm learning what it is that my weakness is and being able to strengthen it.
Yeah. Well, and then like it kind of reminds me of, it shows people that they can make a difference no matter if they have a strong opinion, a little opinion, a big attitude towards something, or like they're really shy. They can do their part no matter if it's big or little. So.
Because we're learning that the little is big, just as big as the big is big.
Yeah, for sure.
That was such an educational sentence.
So, from what we've been talking about, it kind of made me think that on this last question it asked what level you personally think is the most important to advocate at and why. I almost thought that every type of advocacy almost starts in the micro level. Because you could start with just advocating within your own family or within your neighborhood, and then that could move to like within your school because you go to the board meetings, and then that could lead to someone picking up and be like, oh, this person, I agree with them, I like their views, like I would like to have them like share them in a wider network, and then all of a sudden you're advocating in the meso system and then in the macro system all of a sudden. Like I think that a lot of advocacy can start in the micro system, and then people just pick up on it and they agree with you and they want your views to be heard because they are their views, and then I think it's just from there you get support and you get followers that just, I don't know if I'm even making any sense, but kind of that idea of when you stand up for something, you may think you're alone, and then all of a sudden you'll realize that there are so many other people that have that same view, but they were just waiting for someone to follow, waiting for someone to put that first bit of courage out there to make it easier for them to also express their views.
Mm. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I really liked what Katie said about, we can advocate just as we stand guard over our families. And, I really feel like I've done that over the last 30 years with my family. And now I, watch the position my daughters and daughter-in-law are in, and the things that are coming at them from their schools as their little children go to school. And it's like, it's just so important for us to be, aware of everything that's going on.
Yeah. Because as we teach our families, then they recognize the evil because they have that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it reminded me of like, that's why Satan attacks the family, is because he knows how strong it can be and how strong, if the parents teach their children, that how it can not be broken. It's like that's his goal, is the family, because that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. So I'm constantly having conversations with my husband about this, and it was interesting because I showed him, how it starts from the individual, really. And so he went. He's the branch president, and I didn't know he was doing this, but I found out he listened because the new branch goal this year is we're actually going through the 12-step addiction recovery as a branch. And he said, some of you might have huge addictions, and some of you might just be addicted to sleep or sports or your electronic. And the whole point was we need to strengthen ourselves, because as we do that, and I'm like, cool, he's going to work on the micro and work our way up to the macro, and I'm so proud of him for listening to me, and it's just kind of cool, and I can see where we could go with that.
Well, as you talk about, I share something, maybe it's too personal, but I was just called into the Stake Relief Society presidency last Friday, and Saturday morning when I woke up, I thought of the story of Moses with his staff with the snake built on, he had to make that, and they were commanded to, if they'd been bitten by the scorpions, to look at the symbol, and so many people died because they refused to look, and the scripture says they died because of the easiness of the way. And I related, as I studied my scriptures that last Saturday, I just related that to all we're told to do is have our family home evening and our family prayer and our scripture reading to sustain ourselves, and so many of us fail to do that because it's so easy to just put it off a little longer, and you get so busy with doing everything else, but we've been promised on so many levels that that's what's going to protect us. And how can we get people to actually follow through and do those things that are going to protect their families?
Right.
So I don't know. I look at these two things that we're looking at, the CRC and the United Nations Convention, and they've got good points in it about the child prostitution and the children working, and then they throw that stuff in there about child's natural rights, and it's like they just got to slide all those little things in there that don't need to be there. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what they mentioned at this conference, was this Planned Parenthood thing, and how they say, oh, we're just trying to help the children, protect them, but someone made the comment that this company makes money from people who do have diseases or people that do need an abortion, and so why wouldn't they promote the things that bring in their, so it's all so contradictory, so very evil, and it was amazing how they spent a whole entire day talking about addiction to money. So if they can convince you of this part of the circle, then they can get the results of this part of the circle. So they continue to convince you of this part of the circle, which is the positive, so that they can get what, I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah.
If they can sell their idea through saying they're protecting the kids, they will make money off those kids. I mean, it's just twisted. It's twisted.
Well, it's like my other class this week, we've been talking about child care. And so many families, just like you said, have that need. You think you have to have everything for your family, so both parents are out in the workforce, just trying to make minimum wage for a lot of families. And so where are the children going? And so there's that whole vicious cycle of child care and the children not being with the parents, and it just all feeds on each other.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really took a lot of hope from Elder Scott's comment on being hopeful about his optimism is infectious, and his light and truth will be preserved in our time. So it's like, we can't give up, and we got to remember that.
You know what I realized when we were reading? We talked about all these micro and exo and macro, but what I realized is Heavenly Father consumes all of those levels.
Oh,
because
yeah.
we cover the earth. We're in the micro level with the gospel and the light of Christ, and it's like I wanted to put in a third circle because we're spread out all over the world, you know. And no
Right.
matter what level we are personally, we as a combined Zion surround these other systems.
Well, that's so true. That's such a great way to put it. But I think somewhere in class this week that they said that as the world discovers truth, they're getting closer and closer to Heavenly Father's plan. And it's like you just described that. So,
Yeah.
good job.
Yeah, I think it is great that with the expansion in the church and the spreading of the gospel that it is coming to the point, like it really is how it is that the gospel has influence in every area, that the Lord has his people there in every system. He has I guess you could say he has some power, he's got some influence through the people in the systems. And I don't know, to me that gives me kind of a lot of hope that like it's not totally lost. There are still some good people out there that are advocating with us. And I don't know, I think that's a good note to bring into this kind of dreary conversation about the terrible things.
And what's interesting is we're still such a small minority number, yet having this kind of impact on the world.
Yeah.
Well, and time and time again, the last couple of weeks, I've thought of all the places in the world where there are temples in those countries now. There's more and more members of the church going to the temple, and that builds a Zion community in their areas. So I think we're small, but we're mighty.
Definitely. Okay.
And all of you guys have your story. We've had this conversation of why we've been drawn to go back to school and take this particular program. So we're all being called to something.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's like I just keep hoping that I'll be adequately prepared.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when I told my parents that I'd chosen this major of marriage and family studies, because originally I had been in chemistry, and my dad, when I told him that I was going into marriage and family studies, he kind of like, okay, whatever. Wasn't really excited that I'd finally figured out where I wanted to be, and then he pulled me aside and was like, are you just taking this major because you think it will be easier? And I was like, almost shocked, but every time I tell someone my major is marriage and family studies, I get kind of that same reaction, kind of that look like you're just taking it because it's easy and then you can just have a degree and do all this stuff. But I'm like, no, I'm not taking it because it's easy. I'm taking it because it's important.
Yeah.
It's important to me. It's something that my lifelong goal is to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also wanted an education, and so why not combine them and get an education that'll help me be a better mom and then also lead to me being able to help others. It was like, I don't know, I thought it was so interesting that it was that look of, why would you do that? Like, that's just an easy major, instead of that, oh, we need more of that, we need more, like, we need more people that are educated in this, and like, I don't know. It just kind of goes to show how the views of the world are changing.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing. I just, at age 50, I went back to college, and before I knew about all this online school 4 years ago, and I got an associate's degree in business management, and I loved all the accounting classes that I had. But at my age, how much longer can I work in accounting? And I really prayed over this. And then when I found out about I wanted to graduate from BYU, so I did all this to just be a transfer student. And when I found out about the marriage and family studies major, I was just, it took me back 20 years to when we heard the proclamation to the world on the family. And it just all came together. And it's like, this is where I need to be. And it's like people ask me what I'm studying, and I tell them, and I get the same reaction. It's like, oh yeah, what are you going to do with that? And it's like, well, I can't answer that yet, but I know something's out there. So I take heart from all of you saying you're in the same boat. You're headed somewhere, but you don't know why or what you're going to do. So I guess we'll be there together at some point.
Well, I guess now when people ask, well, what are you going to do with your major? You can always just say you're going to protect the family. That's always...
That's a
I
fantastic
said
answer.
to my brother-in-law the other day, he was like, well, what are you going to do with that major? And I was like, well, he asked, what can you do with that major? And I was like, well, you could go further and do, like, counseling and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, what are you going to do with it? I was like, well, I'll use it to raise my family and protect the family. And he was like, okay. And just, like, was like, oh, I'm stumped by your answer, but I'll take it. And so it was just kind of a...
Well, that was great. You said that so well. I wrote it down. That's going to be my answer from now on.
I always said it like sarcastic, kind of a joke or a stab kind of a thing, but I don't know, just now I thought about it and I was like, oh my gosh, I should just say that because it's so true. That is what we're learning how to do, is protect it. So and you don't need to be in a paying occupation to use it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why people are so shocked that we chose it. They're like, what can you do with that major? How much money can you make? And I'm like, well, it's not about the money. It's about who we're protecting, who we're teaching. Like, it's really important. People forget that the family is, like, the #1 important thing, whether you're a member of the church or not. But I like how you did put that. That's really good.
I'm kind of glad you brought it up because nobody who doesn't take this course has no idea the in-depth of understanding that we're gaining as we pick apart every aspect of family and society. I've never been so educated in my life. I think this should be a staple in schools.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
I work in a high school and I see all those young kids every day and the confusion that they're facing, and it's just sad. And they need something to give them hope.
In Payette, where I used to live in Idaho, just outside of Oregon, they actually had a required parenting class that you had to take. I was talking to one of the seniors, in fact, just this last Sunday, because she was carrying around those fake babies that'll cry at certain times, and you have to change their diaper. And I was like, well, what is this? Is this for a class? Like, and she's like, yeah, everyone in high school has to take. It's a graduation requirement to take this. It's kind of like a child development / parenting class. And I was like, I mean, it comes from the idea of they need to educate teens because now more teens are becoming parents. But at the same time, I don't want to say good has come of that bad transition, but I think it opens a door for us to be able to put family education in to schools along with that kind of a thing. I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a program. It's like a small 9-week course in the family consumer science class, and then they offer a parenting class for the kids that are pregnant. So, but yeah, it needs to have a little bit different focus. You know, they send you to school to learn how to drive a car. I think you ought to take some classes before you get married and start dating on how to raise a family and how to be a part of a family and the tools you need to be successful.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if you guys saw, but Ashley has to leave and so does Colette. So I think we should probably just wrap this up because I think Ashley's the only one that can record this.
Okay.
Yeah. So who is going to sum it up for us?
I will.
Thank you.
I'm not going to read each individual question, but we talked about the CRC video, thought it was clever, logical, It's kind of scary how there was positive, how there was negative, but woven in with the positive. We talked about the concern that parents can only give advice, they can't really teach and parent their children, and that power is taken from the parents and given to the children who are still developing and not quite mentally or emotionally or mature enough, prepared for that type of thing, and that the school system's taking over parenting. Let's see. We talked about. Ashley brought up she'd be interested to know what the citizens and communities are saying about the CRC, and I mean it's very understandable why they want to help kids, but they can't be allowed to dictate the lives of others. There's really good stuff on the surface, but a lot of blurred lines. Need a voice for good. CRC talking points about children's sexual revolution, right to experiment, medical treatment without consent, children's right to satisfaction, and all under health. So which I would love, Katie, to get a copy or to know how to purchase my own copy of all that information that you shared with us. Okay. We develop better when we learn from our parents who have matured and gone through a lot of the same situations. So it would be in the children's best interest to be able to have that in their lives, and until they are mature and ready to be more on their own. The CRC worries that there's worry that it trumps the Constitution. We already have laws and whatnot, and we don't need the bad woven in with what we already have in the United States. So then we talked about Kelly's presentation. We each learn from different systems. Each relies on the other and affects the other. I have a lot of notes, so I'm trying to... one person has a lot of power. Whether or not we decide to get involved, it's up to us and our choice. We can be like the little molecule, and one little change or one little voice can have that effect. A small part can make a big difference. So just to remember to do our part and to listen to the Spirit and let that be our guide as well, and have knowledge and be empowered through knowledge when we do our part. We talked about the different systems and how the bigger macro would make us a little nervous and afraid for some of us, and for the rest of us felt like they would not be as emotionally attached on the bigger scale, and but be able to affect all the other systems as well. So find your strengths and do what you can for families, because we can each do something. We can each make a difference, no matter how big or small, because the little is the big. Okay, I have 2 more pages, and I really have to go, so I'll just... We had a great conversation, and I'll have it all typed up. And
yeah, just
I'll end on Heavenly Father consumes all of the systems. He is at the head, and we need to remember that, and remember that He needs us to do our part, and we can do that, and we are trying to do that through this class, and we are trying to protect the family. And I think that even in our small little world, in our small little communities, we are making efforts to contribute as well, and to make our own waves and our own ripple effect. And I am so sorry, but I have somewhere to be.
That's okay.
So,
good job.
That's perfect.
I literally have 4 pages worth of notes, so I'm going to have to condense them because I have so much going on. I don't have time to type that up. So, okay, sorry guys. Have a good rest of your week.
bye.
Thank you. See you next week.
Well, I think we did good.
Yeah, it was a good conversation.
Yeah. So, did we decide who's mediator next week? Did we all get a chance to do it yet?
I haven't mediated. I've only taken notes.
Cool.
Okay. Do you want to be the mediator, Ashley?
Sure, that works.
Okay. And then has someone not getting a chance to take notes?
I
No.
haven't yet. I can do that.
You want to? Okay. Cool. So,
Yep, I've done both.
okay.